Welcome to our 129th episode of the Gutenberg Changelog podcast. In today's episode, we will talk about WordPress 7.0 and Gutenberg 22.8. I'm your host, Birgit Pauli-Haack, curator of the Gutenberg Times and full-time core contributor for the WordPress open source project sponsored by Automatic. With me today, and I'm really happy about that, is again Beth Soderberg, founder and CEO of Bethink Studio, a full-service boutique agency and of web experts to tackle any project. Beth has been a long-time WordPress theme builder and WordCamp speaker. She's also been an early adopter of the blog editor and blog themes. Beth, how are you today? Welcome to the show.
I am well. How are you today? Thank you for having me.
I'm good. We have winter in Munich again. It was spring and now it's back to winter. So I'm happy to get out of the town for WordCamp Asia next week.
Yes.
So yes, I'm really happy about that.
We've been switching from winter to spring every day here
Every day.
in Virginia. Yep.
Oh
It's
my
different
God,
every day.
Yeah, so what's the weather doing? Well, I don't know.
No, I've had to look every morning because it's in the last week I've been outside in a winter coat and a tank top and rain boots, and you just
Yeah,
don't know. You
you
wake
don't
up
know.
and it's a surprise.
Well, it's the beauty of surprises, but who likes surprises? I want my spring be
Right.
steady. So.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so under the announcements, we have one thing that guidelines, content guidelines landed in Gutenberg 22.7. We didn't really talk about it with Maggie Cabrera at the last episode, but the WordPress AI team has launched guidelines. They are a live experiment in the Gutenberg 22.7 or Gutenberg plugin. And this project creates a single source of truth for site standards and ensures that everyone, humans and AI tools, follow the same editorial voice and content rules. By providing this infrastructure layer, WordPress can finally maintain a consistency across content contributors. So that's so far from the experiment post that I definitely going to share in the show notes. When you want to use AI for helping you produce content, you definitely want to store some of those standards somewhere. And the experiment lets you do this on your website, in your interface, with a nice interface for that. I don't know how I feel about this because I have been using AI quite a bit in the last 2 years, and some of it was for content creation ideas, but the writing is still kind of mostly a human factor. But it helps me for research and it helps me for learning. So I'm not quite sure how that translates to a WordPress site, but I guess if you have ongoing content production that is more service oriented, then you might want to use the help of LLMs or something like that. What do you think?
I'm skeptical for the same reasons. I think that I have had clients ask for something like this, but the more those clients have actually used AI to create content, the more those very same people who had announced that they were going to create all of their content through AI decide that they are going to use AI for research and then create their content. So the AI in actual practical use has been more about reducing friction in that discovery research phase of writing and less about creating the writing itself until you get to the editing part when it becomes helpful again for grammar. But that actual connecting ideas and proving expertise piece is where AI can't do it. And you
Mm-hmm.
need somebody who actually understands what they're reading to piece together the
I can
logic of it.
I can also see, and we will see this in that you use AI to write an excerpt or to give you suggestions for titles or make sure that there's an alt text on the image. I think these grunt work tasks kind of thing, our
Mhm.
AI is really helpful. But I think the human ideas are still, well, humans hallucinate so much better than AI can ever can. So
Right. How can we possibly replicate that? And I think there's also a place for it with things like you mentioned the alt text, right? Having it generate them all and then validating that it did it correctly is much faster than writing it all yourself. That is where we're going to see these things actually become practical, right? There's a lot of big ideas about it, which makes
Mhm,
sense when you're dealing with a new technology and an innovation in a major workflow.
mhm.
But in actuality, I think that's more how people are going to use it. And I think if people set it up to automate everything and then never look at it,
Yeah,
never
that's
validate it, that's people are just going to get in trouble over
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So, and I use it a lot to generate fake content
Mm,
so that I can show someone what something will look like, knowing that the content I'm showing them is not real, right?
right. Yeah.
But when you're dealing with real content, the biggest mistake I've seen
Mhm.
over and over again, and humans will learn because we always eventually do, but the mistake is not reviewing what AI has done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So,
definitely. Yeah, it's not a replacement. It's a tool that you need to validate like any other tool you have to
yeah,
do. I can see that if you have a longer text, like 4,000 words or something like that, you could actually use AI to identify the gaps. If a reader goes through it and say, okay, there is a gap because it didn't explain why something happens, I think those tips are really helpful, especially when you have longer text or you want to focus on one problem and just kind of figure out what's in scope and out scope. But I think that's more like an advisory kind of thing and not a doer.
yeah,
Okay.
validating because sometimes I love Grammarly Pro. Grammarly, the free version, is very annoying, but if you pay for it, it becomes a really useful tool. But even then, the content suggestions it makes, sometimes they tighten up your language and they add the commas, which is the thing that I don't do naturally on my own, apparently. But sometimes they change the meaning completely.
Yeah.
And that's when you're like, nope, thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah.
That's a no.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I think, how this type of thing used well will make people more efficient. But I
Mhm.
also can see it creating a mountain of work for somebody who doesn't actually need to go through all of these ridiculous suggestions about it. And I think that deciding when to use it, when it makes sense, those strategic decisions about how to use it are going to be what makes it either something that really helps somebody in their publishing workflow or really hinders
Mhm.
somebody else.
Well, if you're on a single blogger, yeah, having a little editor go through that and give you some tips, that might not be a bad idea, but sometimes. But
Right.
if you have been blogging for many, many years, yeah, you don't need things like that. Yeah. It
Yeah.
changes your voice and it changes the outlook. That's what the guidelines are actually for, that you can create some of the guidelines as it
Mhm.
meant to be to help AI to streamline some of that stuff and also to know about what you want to do. And that certainly helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of AI, what I found in 7.0 WordPress, so getting closer to that release, there is now a new connectors page that you could connect to an OpenAI, to Google, Gemini, or to Anthropic Claude from your site. And if you have certain tools that help you with those connections. So there are AI providers for other AI systems, like I just discovered three of them. One is the AI provider for Open Router or Router, depending on which English-speaking country you go to. It's a little bit different. So Open, I say router, is a service that lets developers use many different AI models, like those from Google OpenAI, but also others through one simple connection. And the provider was developed by Jonathan Bossinger. who is on the AI team and talks about AI on the developer blog. There's also an AI provider for Olama, and Olama is a local system where you can connect local LLMs. So you can download an LLM set, and Olama helps you connect that with the task that you want to do. The benefit of Olama is that it's on your server and it doesn't go out to the third-party services, but you still need a provider and connector to it. And of course, you can do this on any VPS connection or virtual private server system because you have room and space there to download and add certain things. But it's definitely important for companies that want to not get data outside of their system. And the last one is for Europeans, the AI provider for Mistral. Mistral AI is a French AI company founded in 2023 by a former Google DeepMind and Meta researchers, and they build and publish large language model and be a respected independent AI in Europe. Speaking of this, what that all comes together is that the AI team, and with that Laurie Sani, published a call for testing for community AI connector plugins. There's certain links to the plugins and the connectors, so it would be really cool if you're interested in that part of it to actually go ahead and test things and report back what you find and what you didn't find and how it all works for your site. It's a total different approach for working with a site using AI, as we discussed, but it might be pretty interesting for developers to connect with all those AI providers and provide services in a plugin or something like that. And if you are not a developer, you can install the AI Experiments plugin that also comes from the core AI team, and it will show up on the connectors page with a link to the plugin and what you can do with it. And it has these things like create an excerpt or check the alt text or create a featured image, just so you can kind of get a feel for these kind of works on the WordPress site. Do you think you have a need to kind of use some of the providers for your agency or for some clients?
I think for some clients, it has started.
Mhm.
I think that for the agency itself, not yet.
Mhm.
We have started to do more writing publicly, but really what we're doing is turning internal communications to clients into public-facing documentation so that we can point to them more easily. So it's
Mhm.
not something we need help with in the same way. I think for some clients, we have started to integrate things like this in an experimental way, right? And there are, as with anything that's new, people don't know how to use these things yet. And I am not against experimenting with a new thing. I love the new stuff. But at the same time, I'm cautious about putting new things into a production environment
Yeah.
without really making sure that it makes sense. Because sometimes some of these, in terms of experimentation, like I will install them, and actually Grammarly is a great example. It took me several years to decide that I was fine with it
Mhm.
because I tried it and it was annoying. And then a few years later, I tried it again and it was still annoying. And then one day I realized that it really was like their premium suggestions really were fixing my comma issue, which is a known issue I have with writing and grammar. I just don't put commas anywhere. And um,
I put them in randomly.
well, and so,
Here's a few commas.
but I experimented with the tool probably 3 times before I
Mhm.
was like, you know what, let me try the premium version and see
Yeah.
how that goes. And I tried it, and a few days later, I was like, yeah, this is actually making my writing better. But it
Mhm.
was one of those like I was monitoring over time if it really made sense with my
Mhm.
workflow.
Yeah. Yeah, and
So
that's how I
that,
approach it too. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that's how I've felt about these. And I think what's exciting about it is that the infrastructure to do it is becoming more full-fleshed. But that does not mean people know how to do it
Yeah.
yet,
Yeah.
right? And so that's the next step is that experimentation phase collectively of how can we make these tools that we've now created function in the best way.
So I really appreciate that the WordPress core developers think about the plumbing of all these services
Hmm.
and putting it all the foundation in to open up that total space for freedom for the developers. And there's a standard there on how to approach certain. So if you are, as a site owner, don't have a plugin that kind of taps into LLMs and you open up Gemini for it, you couldn't switch just easily to Claude when you think that's a better fit for that problem, but the plugin will still work. So that's actually what this whole connector thing is about. And it just came up as for the AI providers, but actually the connector API is for any external service standard. So a standard for any external service. So if you need the OpenStreetMap on your site and you have an API key, the plugin can actually use the connectors API to monitor those API keys and just put it in there. The plugin doesn't have to come up with its own interface for that, which a lot of plugin developers did for the last 15 years. Yeah. But now they can kind of could actually throw away that piece of the plugin and just tap into the connectors API and don't have to maintain that piece of the code. But anyway, so that's kind of
Yeah.
the bigger picture behind it.
Hmm.
And that's all coming with WordPress 7.0, which we are now getting to the more practical stuff of WordPress 7.0. So first of all, the WordPress 7.0 release candidate 2 has been published this week. It's crunch time. The final release is only 2 weeks away. So if you haven't tested yet, now is really the time to get in there and figure out if your theme plugins and sites actually still work with 7.0. And the developer notes are published. The field guide is in the works. And I will continue the list of dev notes and the show notes like we did the last two episodes. I also know, because I have been working on it, the Gutenberg Times Source of Truth is almost done and will be published before this episode actually hits your favorite podcast app. So you get an additional link there. So Beth, did you get a chance to look over the WordPress 7.0 features? What are the most important ones for you and your fellow agency owners and developers? Is there anything that you are really excited about?
Yes and yes. So the first thing that I think is going to be honestly hugely problematic for a lot of agencies is the change in PHP minimums. Because I think that I know that there are a lot of folks sitting on older sites, older themes. Maybe they're stuck at PHP 7.1. And there are old things out there. And I think that this PHP requirement jump is going to catch some people off guard. So
So it jumps from,
it's, we're now requiring
uh,
7.4.
yeah,
And if you
but
do
that was
not,
already 6.9, right?
yeah, but I think this is going to hit harder
Okay.
because people are going to want the new stuff. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot in here that is really great. And I'm starting with the thing that I think is going to be most disruptive because I think that people are going to want the other stuff, right?
Hmm.
And so I think that that's going to catch some people off guard. The other thing that I think is going to be really important is the new admin look and feel
Hmm.
because people have been training their clients for many, 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 many years with what it looks like now. And there is a client education need here because when the admin changes, even in minor ways, you get clients that come back and say, "What happened? I don't know how to do it."
Okay. Even
Right?
if nothing changes except the color.
Right. Where did it go? Why is this different? And did I do something? Did I, right? The that human element of like, hey, you're okay. It's gonna look a little different, but I promise You're going to be able to do it. Just holler if you have any questions,
Hmm.
right? Because I think that there's a lot of, at least working with long-term clients, where you become sort of an advisor on the technology rather than a day-to-day implementer. And for those folks with something like this, what I like to do is say, hey, heads up, we never do the major core updates right away. I am a let me see how
Hmm.
it goes for everyone else
Right.
type. And then if it seems okay, then I'll go for it. But
So you're one of the ones who wait for 7.0.1.
absolutely. Unless it's been like 3 weeks and there isn't one,
Yeah.
right? So I either wait for a period of time or I wait for a point release. And
Mhm.
if there's a point release, I wait at least 24 hours to make sure there's not another point release. But point being, though, that this is a big enough shift in terms of what people will see and what people can do.
Which part of the admin is actually the one that will disrupt people's minds?
Just, I think it looking different at all.
Oh, okay. So
I think,
that
like,
we should never change that. Is that what you're kind of thinking?
no, we should absolutely change it. But because we have not changed it for many, many, many
Yes,
years,
yes. Mhm.
it will be a surprise. And I think that it's easy as folks who are in these systems every
Mhm.
day to be like, wow, they finally fixed that. That's great. That might be my reaction to many of these changes, right? But I also know when I log in to pay my credit card and they've changed it all, and even though the buttons are the same, it looks different, I don't have as much confidence about clicking the button. And the vast majority of people who are maintaining the contents on these sites day to day are marketing people, communications people, regular everyday writing people, and they are not sitting there thinking about how the structure of the software works all the time the way we do.
Yeah,
And
but they still get their work done. So
they
yeah,
still get their work done. What I like to do with clients is just reduce friction by increasing confidence,
yeah.
right? And so, like, my message to them is going to be, hey, you need to know that this is going to look different, but your workflow in terms of the things you know how to do is the same. Don't let it freak you out. You've got this. Keep going, right? But
All
like
right.
just
Okay.
that little bit, because that is 100% what gets people. It's the
Yeah.
smallest stuff. They just need to know, like, hey, the problem's not me.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, there's not a problem. It's fine. And then they're good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the first
So
5 seconds. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that
I get you.
psychological adjustment. And I
Yeah.
think because
Yeah.
it hasn't changed for so
Yeah.
long,
Hmm.
that it's just going to be something that I
Okay.
mention to
Is there
people because
anything else that you are really excited about, or is it just
I know.
all
Okay.
"Wah!" Things change?
Okay.
I don't like
Things
it.
change. Things change. I'm really, really excited about the cover block video embeds.
Yeah.
That is really, really going to reduce the size of things as they
Hmm.
load for a lot of websites, and that is fabulous. In
Yeah.
addition, in addition to improving workflow, all of the things around block visibility by screen size are make me really happy. I'm really happy about the changes in the header block. And I've been building this into themes for years, and the only thing that makes me nervous about it is that I need to go back and see how it impacts the things I've already built that replicate
Yeah.
this feature. But
Do you mean the navigation overlays
the
to kind of,
navigation overlays,
yeah.
yeah, because you're going to have such increases in both accessibility compliance and SEO optimization just by virtue of having the option to manage your headings visually versus syntactically. So I'm very excited about that. I love that our revisions menu now has visual changes
Yeah.
because I know that most people looking at the markup that's been in there lately are like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
How do I?
know.
I have to squint so much to look through the code to
Yeah.
find things. Yeah.
And then there's a few exciting changes to the navigation, and the better workflows for pattern overrides.
Yeah.
It was there before, but it was one of those like mystery off menu features.
Mhm.
If it was there, if you knew how to find it.
Yeah, yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
So those are the things I'm most excited about. I think there's some other cool stuff in there. And I am excited about the general infrastructure that we were just referencing that is being solidified with this release. And I
Hmm.
think that piece may not be as exciting on the outset because it's infrastructure. It's like nonprofits have a hard time funding infrastructure process projects. It's the same reason, but it lays the groundwork for a whole new level of experimentation. I'm excited to see where that goes, and I recognize, I think you said it very well a few minutes ago, the thoughtfulness to creating an extensible infrastructure that has gone into these features in the roadmap and sort
Hmm.
of planning moving forward.
You mentioned the cover block video embeds. That means that you can have a video just to catch up our listeners. It's to use a URL to YouTube or to Vimeo and pull that in into a cover block instead of uploading the video to the website, because that reduces the cost of hosting and bandwidth for the website, definitely. And it also, you don't have to maintain the speed and all that on your own server. So it's always good to offset that into a different service.
Hmm.
How are you feeling about the manage the fonts from the appearance menu directly instead of hunting it down under the fonts typography menu on the global styles?
I'm feeling really good about that. I remains to be seen for me. The biggest issue I have with font management, I am not sure. It might be addressed here, but I need to experiment. When you get a font from a total third party, non-standard, like independent type foundry place, getting those integrated, there has still been some friction. So I'm excited about it being easier to find. In general, I think that's great. I will be experimenting a little bit with if it reduces friction in some of these more edge cases.
Hmm.
Because if you're using a Google font, it's great. And it's been pretty good for a while. But if you are integrating something from another provider, if it's a big provider, the friction is
Is that
probably
a,
not as bad.
yeah.
But if it's like this obscure type foundry that makes like only these little types of historic fonts, which I run into recently, getting it actually integrated properly
Hmm. Is
can
it a,
be really hard
is it
because
a,
you're dealing with not the most sophisticated type foundry in terms of the format of their files, and they're not
mm,
necessarily plugging in as best as the totally optimized stuff
mhm.
from the more common sources. So
Yeah. Is it more a format issue, or is it more kind of how it scales in different font sizes and different typography features?
it's a format issue with the font files
Mhm.
themselves.
Mhm.
And so I think some of it is probably an education piece for
The
people
Foundry.
who make fonts,
Hmm.
but I also know that most developers don't know that much about how fonts are made. And so when you put those two things together, you create some problems. But I think this is a huge step towards getting to the point of being able to solve the edge cases, right?
Hmm.
Because right now, finding where you manage the fonts is difficult.
Right. Yeah, totally.
So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
going in a great direction. Getting into the nitty-gritty of which font providers are supported, and that I think that's the next step from here personally, because I do think there's a homogeny that started from a type standpoint around everyone's using Google Fonts because it's easy.
Yeah. But it's
And
also a problematic for European sites. Yeah.
right. Yeah, because different requirements over whether you're hosting the font files or Google is hosting the font files. Like then you're getting all into all of these legal technicalities of where the font is and who owns it. And I'm glad I'm not a lawyer.
Yeah, me too.
So,
All right, so there are a few developer goodies coming, so to speak, down the pipeline. The PHP only block registrations, and then the pattern overrides for custom blocks that you already mentioned those. I think there are a few smaller stuff like the HTML block enhancements where you can put the CSS separately from the JavaScript and the HTML. You could actually kind of create your own little app there,
yeah,
depending on what privileges you have. I found that there are some problems when you don't have admin privileges. The HTML block really gets scrambled.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's an overall kind of problem with the capabilities, I think, yeah.
Oh, I forgot the breadcrumbs block. That'll help a lot of things. So,
Yeah, yeah. I'm also sure that a lot of agencies and site owners already had that problem solved through, like, for instance, the Yoast SEO plugin had already breadcrumbs for many, many years. Yeah.
yeah,
But
but I like my websites to be as lean and efficient as possible. And this feels like when for a long time was using CoBlocks for accordions,
mhm,
right? And in the beginning, CoBlocks had a lot of things that Core didn't. And so you were using a bunch of things. And eventually it became that I was only using the accordion everywhere.
mhm,
And then one day it became possible to do the equivalent in Core. And I was like, great, I can get rid of this plugin that's only
mhm.
doing this one thing, but has all this other stuff.
Yeah,
And I think that's what makes me excited about this. Yeah, you can do it through Yoast. There's a number of ways to do it. There's some independent breadcrumbs block
plugin.
plugins that are really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I know that Justin Tadlock had a very good breadcrumbs plugin, and he was advising on the core implementation there. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I've used Justin Tadlock's breadcrumbs plugin for a long time, and I'm not going to rip it out of something just because it's there. It works, it's good. But for something else where like you only have this one thing that you're really using in this big suite of plugins,
Yeah.
Yoast is one of them, Jetpack is one of them. Any sort of like cadence blocks, code blocks, any collection of a large number of things when you're only using one of them, you should be considering the idea that maybe you shouldn't use it
Yeah.
at all. Right? And that's what makes me excited about the ability to do this through Core because it allows for some of that extra bloat to be stripped away
Mhm.
in some circumstances.
Yeah. All right. Anything else that you want to kind of cover on 7.0 for your agency or developing theme building needs?
I think that the PHP only block registration, we sort of glanced over it, but I think that's a very exciting big deal. It opens up, the whole challenge, I think, from a developer standpoint, the whole time with Gutenberg has been, how do I level up to do this new thing? How do
Mhm.
I level up to do this new thing? And this opens that door wider. And
Absolutely.
anything that we are doing to open that door wider is great. Similarly, there's a few things in here that are just really tiny that I think will help people. They're not like, again, reducing friction. So
Mhm.
little enhancements to the query loop, there's some new navigation stuff that is just really tiny but really helpful. Dimension support for width and height. That sounds great.
Finally.
Right? Like it's little tiny stuff that reduces friction. And so there's more of that in here. Like the concept of the grid block being responsive is really great.
Well, it was responsible before, but there was a setting where it wasn't, and that's kind of had changed now. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of hidden goodies in here that reduce friction. I do
Yeah.
think the biggest things to look out for are if your themes are compatible,
Mhm.
if your plugins are compatible, and if you have built-in things that replicate some of this functionality, how does that work? Because we're starting to enter, at least for how I've been building themes, a zone where things I have done historically to account for some of these needs are
Hmm.
being subsumed by core, which is great. I just don't know how it's going to work. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
I think, and that's going to be different for everyone in terms of which things it is. But hopefully, and I say hopefully because I know that we have a unified development philosophy about how we build our themes, and there's sort of a continuous logical thread for our themes as they're built over time. Hopefully, agencies who have an internal logic to how they have been building themes can look at this list and say, we should look at how we do that and make sure it still
Hmm.
works,
Yeah.
right? Because there's also going to be agencies where they have a mishmash of things and they don't know, and it's going to be a one-off for each site to see what happens. And,
Yeah.
that goes for anybody who's inherited themes too.
Yeah. But that's also for any of the WordPress releases. Yeah. You have to go through a certain testing phase there.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think some of this is honestly that it's been a while since we've had a major release. And so the quantity of little things feels more.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And I think that's part of why my reaction is this way because I haven't had this thought process in a little while,
For at least 5 months.
at least.
Yeah. Well,
And
the
that,
6.9 came out December 2nd.
right. And so, as somebody who was used to the 4 times a year cadence, it is longer and what's packed into it is greater. And so, I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it is an
Mhm.
adjustment in terms of
Absolutely.
how you review things and what you're looking for. And it's more of this one feels more like a surprise.
Mhm.
Not that it is a surprise, but it feels more like a surprise because it is not on this schedule that I had come to expect.
Mhm.
Right. And I think we're getting towards a new schedule, which is really great. But until we are all psychologically adjusted to whatever that new schedule is, it's going to be a slightly bigger task to review because there's more.
Yeah.
And psychologically, it's going to be like, oh, right, I guess that's happening. And you got to go do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I just think it's just, there's a little
Mhm.
more,
Mhm.
and the timing is not as predictable.
Yeah. And I think that the break that was in 2025 kind of skewed that anyway. Yeah. So we had an April 25, we had a release, and then the next one wasn't until December. Yeah. So
Right.
there were 8 months that kind of, yeah, was about 15 Gutenberg plugin releases. It didn't feel that much that it is now in 7.0 because that was just kind of coming up out of that pause. And now there's a really excitement about the real-time collaboration. There's excitement
Yeah.
about AI. Yeah. So yeah, it feels that there are quite a few heavy new features in there
Hmm.
that also kind of drown out some of the really quality of life things that we have been waiting for quite a bit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's like coming back from a long vacation. Like, oh, ooh, this is really exciting. You know, but that's how it feels. And it's good, but it is absolutely, I think that 2025, you didn't have to be as vigilant because it wasn't happening.
Yeah. Yeah. It
So
was a good
yep.
break.
I think everyone needed it, honestly. I think everyone
Yeah.
really needed it. I know I needed it, but it is,
Yeah.
getting back into the groove of things is where we are now. So
Yeah.
for which I am thankful, but it's still an adjustment.
Me too. Yeah. And now with 7.0 kind of out the door almost, yeah, we are looking at Gutenberg 22.8 that was released this week. Also, kind of what comes into 7.1. It's already starting and people are discussing things. So, although there were quite a few PRs that were either all part of the new WordPress UI package that hasn't been merged into core yet, or it's bug fixes for the connectors or the real-time collaboration for 7.0. So some of the PRs are actually backported to the release candidates and the beta to the release candidates. But let's talk about some of the things that will not be in 7.0, but definitely in 7.1 and what's new in the Gutenberg plugin. So the first thing is the navigation support for the current menu item. So in theme JSON, meaning when you have a navigation and you're on a current page that's part of the navigation, how do you signal that you are at the current page right now in the navigation? And that has been missing for quite a while, or people have just did some CSS workaround of that. But now you can actually style that in theme JSON. And so this is cool. What's also cool is that there is an interface for the states, like hover, focus, current. I'm not sure if that's going to be in there, but it's also part of making the navigation and the hover states and the pseudo support that comes into 7.0, but now it comes also to the interface. So that's pretty cool.
That's my favorite part,
Which one?
the navigation stuff. Again, the interface around the navigation is gotten a lot better in various iterations of Gutenberg, but there's still some like stuff that you'd think you would be able to do that you can't. And that's what some of this is filling in.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
there have been some great work. Some of it gets into 7.0 and some of it is still ongoing. So I really like at the navigation, that's actually in 7.0 that you can create pages and publish them and have them in the navigation in one workflow kind of thing. You don't have to get out of it. You can have to think about it. You just kind of create the page and then you fill it in with content later.
yeah, and I've seen that in other systems. I don't
Mhm.
remember what. That is one of those things where some of these changes, you're like, I saw that once somewhere. Was it Joomla? Was it Drupal? Was it whatever? I don't know. But I liked it and now it's here and that's good.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's how I feel about that because I do appreciate the tiny little decisions that are being considered here by the core team because it seems very small, but the amount of friction you're reducing and the amount of time you're saving for people is
Mhm.
huge.
It's huge, yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, and it's millions of site owners that kind of have
Right.
that advantage, yeah. Do you want to take the next thing?
The tabs menu. So I think this is going to be fun too. So basically, we've got a refactor of the tabs menu block. So it's basically making this more efficient and making some templating changes to how the tabs block works. And if you look at the like actual PR for it, there's really good, very detailed descriptions of how. So it's making it very clear of it's no longer using the template block duplicated in PHP, and instead it's rendering with per tab context, right? And that's like all gobbledygook to some listeners, maybe, but like really what it's doing is making it more efficient and making it
Mhm.
more extensible from a code perspective.
And also
Yeah.
for theme developers, yeah.
Right. And making it more possible, again, opening that door a little wider for more people to be able to work within the code infrastructure,
Mhm.
because that has been the thing that's been the biggest challenge in terms of developer adoption of Gutenberg.
Yeah. And the refactor was also necessary to bring it in line with the approach for the accordion block
Mhm.
so that certain methods and certain functions can be replicated in a similar way for the tabs block. I was actually sad to hear that very early that won't make it into 7.0, but I think that was one of the reasons where they said, okay, let's see if we can kind of align it a little bit more with the accordion block. And it's no surprise that Sarah Norris, who has been a guest here at the Changelog quite a bit, she also created the accordion block, and she has been now instrumental on the restructure of the tabs menu and inner blocks to get it in line and make it more streamlined for developers and theme builders.
The one thing to add that is an exciting piece for especially theme developers is the addition of anchor support for the tabs. So that'll help a lot in terms of things like navigation structures and
Yeah.
feasibility.
Yeah, and
So,
also to kind of interlink different pages. Yeah, you can link
yeah.
to some of the tabs if it's interesting kind of. Yeah. So I know that WooCommerce is using that for their product template. So they have built their own one back then, and now they get a little bit more closer to core, which makes it more extensible and also appreciative. They don't have to maintain the code for it.
Yep, absolutely.
Which is quite a bit. So right now I'm fishing around on my computer to find my notes again. So here we are.
Yes.
All right.
The next one, the showing one's own presence in collaborative editing sessions is, I think, existentially important and just is really going to help this UI experience from the baseline that's being released in 7.0. So,
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that actually will come to 7.0 that made it into the
yeah,
release candidate. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
So the next piece is the one that you can have the site logo an icon screen in the design panel. So in the site editor, there's another menu item now to update the site logo and the icon screen directly from the site editor. So you don't have to go out into the settings page and upload everything that you need to, or into the site logo block or header. You can do it right there from the menu. So it's really an interesting update to change the site logo and the site icon directly in the design site editor.
It's reducing friction. I think that there's a workflow confusion. There's the customizer has become this like vestigial organ that sometimes you need, sometimes you don't need. Where's this? Wait a minute, where do I add CSS? Is it over here? Is it over here? Is it over here? Could it be here? And I think that we're pruning what we need to do through alternate interfaces through changes like this. And the more we can streamline, the better, because the biggest confusion I've seen is actually with brand new or like more junior developers who do not know the quote old way. And so the idea that it's even there, like
Yeah.
they'll get stuck because they can't figure out where it could possibly be coming from. And then some old timer is like, oh, it's over here in this menu that you can't see anymore.
Yeah, yeah, it's
So,
the site
yeah,
icon at the site logo has been a hidden place, and
right.
only until now it's kind of coming into the forefront. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the
Okay.
next thing is another one for the collaboration. I just wanted to point that out that by default, the collaboration on shared hosting is it's limited to two users. And there is also a method for the hosts to either enable that or disable the real-time collaboration. So it might not be as obvious when you go on your site and looking for it. You might not be able to get the real-time collaboration out of the box. You might need to connect with your host to let that enabled because it's such a additional load on a server that certain server configurations are not meant for it to be in yet. So yeah, if you're on a virtual private host, I think I mentioned it before, it wouldn't, I know it was a different scenario, but it's probably easier to get the collaboration working than if you're on a shared hosting with 10,000 websites on a server, where the hosting company will probably restrict that.
Yeah. I think that there's going to be a lot of shifts in hosting, either requirements, configuration, pricing, options, etc., as a result of all of these changes. And I
Mhm.
don't know what they're going to be yet, but we do need to collectively remember that the AI features, the collaboration components, all of those things are resource intensive and are going to shift how hosting is
Mhm.
being utilized. And
Yep.
therefore, the hosts are going to need to respond in order to account for the actual cost of that
Mhm.
change. So I think that's a big unknown right
Absolutely.
now. And I think it's I know there's a few hosts where they're locking in pricing for a few years, which is cool, but at the same time, I'm like, I don't know, in 3 years, is this going to be enough to pay for that what it will be in 3 years?
Hmm. Yeah.
So I think there's a shift coming there, and I am not gonna even pretend to know enough about all the details to know
Hmm.
exactly how that's going to play out. But I think that there's enough shift in what types of resources we need from our hosting that there will be a shift. There has to be, because it's
Yeah.
just so much more resource intensive than what we've been doing in the past
Hmm.
collectively.
Yeah, and that is in line with what you said at the beginning, that the PHP requirements, yeah, is also contributing to that because all the newer features. So there might be you can't upgrade to 7.0 until you update your PHP. That's totally sure.
Yeah, and I've read that somewhere. Somewhere I did read that there'll be security releases on 6.9 for sites that can't go, you know, but then you end up with a situation where how many sites are gonna be stuck on 6.9 forever?
But that has been a
It's been an
problem
issue before.
for, yeah, because the
Yeah.
security team is actually backporting, although officially the release is only supported to 6.8 or something like that. But security team actually backported all the security updates that came with 6.3 or 6.4 to 4 point something.
Hmm.
Yeah, WordPress 4 point something is probably 15 years old. Yeah, so
Right.
it's still getting security updates. So that definitely is a backwards compatibility promise that even the security team there, it takes a lot of time to backport that. And John Blackburn, one of the leads on the security team, has actually done a retrospective of the latest security updates because you saw that too. It's kind of a galore of releases: 6.2, 6.3, 6.4, 7.4
Hmm.
beta. Yeah, it kind of was in within 3 days. I think there were four releases.
It
And
was a lot, yes, all at once.
I had a meetup with here in Munich and we talked about it. I think the day the 6.4 came out, that they were saying, well, is it all hacked or what happened here? Yeah, kind of how often do I have to update my WordPress site in a day? And he did a nice retrospective or explaining what happened and what was the reason for that. I'll link it in the show notes if you're interested, to listeners. It will probably be a little bit lesser prominent because of all the death notes that came out, but it's on the
Right.
Make blog on Core. So
I'm gonna
go
go
ahead.
back and listen to that because that hit during a particularly busy time, just for me personally in general. And so it was a little whiplashy to be like, what is going on over there? And I think it will be good to be able to go back and just review so that I am aware moving forward of what exactly happened there.
Yeah, and back to Gutenberg 22.8. I mentioned it before. There is a feature that implements the state UI for pseudo selectors in the global styles. Maggie Cabrera mentioned that in the last episode. It's now available in the Gutenberg plugin, so you can test it out. It gives you in the global styles on the right-hand side, you can select the design for your pseudo selectors like hover and focus and all that. It's really cool. Hover, focus, focus visible and active. Yeah. So you can change all those settings for buttons, for instance, and you don't have to use theme JSON for it anymore. So this is pretty cool.
Yes. And then this one, I think this is fascinating. There is a PR adding client side navigation block with interactive features that just sounds really fun to experiment with. So, what it's doing is adding a variant to the create block interactive template that allows you to add client side navigation. So, and this is starting to support again, supporting the infrastructure that exists with actual tooling and UI to use it. So the way that it describes it, this variant provides a self-contained working example that mirrors real-world patterns, query parameter navigation for pagination, search results, filtered archives, and works immediately after scaffolding with no posts or setup required. That's really cool.
That's really cool. Yeah.
That's really nerdy
Hmm.
and very arcane and wonderful. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And that variant is for the Create Block scaffolding feature, if I
Mhm.
understood this correctly. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
Create Block latest. So if you create a custom block, you can have the variant for your client-side navigation and scaffold that up. That's really cool. Yeah. Well, our developer advocacy team, we are working on a so-called showcase for all the good things that you could do with a website or theme, including some of the interactivity API features. And we will probably release that someday in the next 2 months, I would think. And it will be a music site with albums and musicians and artists and using the tabs and using the playlist and block. And then also kind of have some interesting changes in the theme. So it's for custom post types and all that. So it's going to be really cool. I know that Juan Margarito, who put the client-side navigation template into the Create Block scaffolding, he's also creating a plugin to have the music play even if you navigate away from that page that had the list of the music. So it's kind of really interesting to see. So you could use it for video and music. So things stay on the forefront on your browser, even if you look at other pages on the website. So that's one of the
That
features. Yeah.
the part of me that likes to listen to podcasts from the website themselves really appreciates this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I definitely once it's out, I definitely gonna adopt it for the Gutenberg
yeah,
Changelog podcast.
yeah.
So I think are we through? We
Those are
are
the
through
big
with
things.
Gutenberg
You're through the big
22.8.
things.
Yeah.
Lots of little things, but those are the big exciting things, I
Yeah.
think.
And there were actually 38 PRs that were backported as bug fixes to 7.0. So it's still an ongoing work that is coming out in 2 weeks, and
Yeah.
people are still fixing it. All right. Well, I wish you and your agency all the best for that release, that all the things that come in don't disrupt your work or the work of your clients.
We have a list. We
Good.
know where to look for the problems.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I'm so happy that you were on the show with me. And as always, dear listener, the show notes will be published on gutenbergtimes.com/podcast. This is episode 129. And if you have questions and suggestions or news you want us to include, send them to changelog@gutenbergtimes.com. That's changelog@gutenbergtimes.com. So thank you for listening, and I wish you all a great weekend. Well, or next week, and also toi for the WordPress 7.0 release updates. We will hear each other again in 4 weeks once I get back from WordCamp Asia. And then we'll tackle what's coming in 7.1 and what has been in Gutenberg plugin 22.9 and 23.0. Thank you so much, Beth Soderberg. It was wonderful to have you and your perspective and your opinions on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here and to see you again. And I wish you safe travels on all of your continuing travels.
Well, thank you. All right, yeah. And you take care. And
Okay,
I'll put in the show notes how people can connect with you.
sounds good.
Of course. All right. You take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks, everybody.